Okay, now we're recording. Alrighty, so for those of you watching this later, I nearly forgot to record. Thanks to Laurel and my mom, they've pointed that out. All you have missed so far is that we are mixing very, very pale shades of earth colors. Okay, so some pale, pale green, pale blues, very, very light brown. And we are now ready to start trying to actually paint the body of this turtle. Okay, set that aside for practice paper. Get your painting back up here. Okay. I like his shell color so much better. Again, see the difference between using really cheap paints and higher quality paints. The colors you can get tremendously different. Okay. I'm going to start back and move forward. So I'm going to start with his back flipper here. And I am going to use just a pale gray-brown color, if that makes sense. Basically, it could be gray, it could be a slightly brown. Doesn't matter a whole lot. I guess what I'm saying is sort of a warm gray. Okay, as long as it's pale, as long as it's very thin. Okay. All right, hopefully you've got a color you're happy with, and we're ready to go. Okay, using a small round brush, I'm going to paint right up to the bottom of the shell. And then I want to fade that out to the whole flipper. So I'm going to dry off my brush a bit so that there's not as much moisture in there. And so I've got a fairly dry brush, and I'm going to just kind of pull the paint this direction and get it to blend into the white paper. Okay, with the goal of keeping this area up here a little darker. If it didn't stay dark enough, you can go back in and add a little bit darker tone. Keep in mind it is going to dry lighter. So there I'm just tapping in itty bits of this darker gray. And because it's all wet, it's going to bleed and blend into a nice graded wash. I can move the paint around a little and help it do that. Okay. Basically, we just don't want super white paper on there, and we want it to look like there's a bit of a shadow being cast by the shell. All right, we're going to do the same thing to his body, focusing mostly along the edge of the shell. Okay, same kind of color. I'm going a hair warmer, so a little browner. And I'm just going to run the brush right up along the side of the shell. Stop right about there for now. And then I'm taking a clean brush again with just water. I'm going along that line before it dries. And I'm just going to pull that into a graded wash again out to just the white paper. Now here's where the paper towels come in handy. Let's say something got way darker than you intended. Okay, you've got time before it dries to fix that. You can, while it's still wet, just take your paper towel and stamp it. Don't rub, just stamp, and that will lift a lot of the pigment off. If it does start to dry, you can just go over it with some water and then stamp. Sometimes I'll twist a little if I need to really get into the paper, but I don't want you to rub. I'll demonstrate how that works over here. There's a few of these little splatter spots that I think are just standing out too much. That is bothering me for some reason. I want to get rid of this one completely. So what I'm going to do, in some colors this will work and others it won't, but this blue lifts off pretty easily. I am just covering this little speck with water, and then I'm lifting off the pigment. That's it. And I could keep going and pretty much get that all off. This is called a scrubbing out technique when you're really trying to get all the pigment basically scrubbed out of the paper. I typically use it more for a lifting off technique. And that is where you're just trying to lift a little bit of the pigment. You're not trying to take it off. Okay, but yeah, so if I get really close, I can see a hint of a blue mark still, but nobody else can. All right, so if this got too dark, you can go over with some water and lift out. Okay, so I like this, the color of his body there right now. Now let's do his head. We're gonna do the same kind of thing. I'm gonna go a definite brown direction. Avoid painting his eye, his actual like eyeball, the dark, where the dark spot would be, because we want to preserve a little white highlight if at all possible. So we don't want to taint that at all. Okay, so I'm going to paint sort of the top part of his head, but I also want to have the colors for his chin and neck ready to go. And if you look at the photograph, you can really see just how much blue is reflecting. See all this cool green, cool blue tones that are being reflected? We're not going to go quite that dramatic because in a painting, sometimes our eyes will think that that doesn't look as realistic, even if the photograph in real life is like that. So we're going to go a little more subtle. I've got my colors ready to go. Starting with the brown, I'm just going to paint up the side of his head, being careful not to go into the water line, staying around and away from his eye. We want it to stay very, very light. You want to still be able to see those spots that you drew. Okay, so a lot of water, little bit of paint. Okay, now before that dries, I need to drop in the blue. Okay, so the blue is going under, the blue gray is going under his chin and blending into the brown. And just paint his neck, don't paint the front flippers yet. Okay, now that's not as blue or standing out as much as I want it to yet. I'm gonna let that dry a second, but I'm not gonna let it dry completely. After it's nearly dry, but still just a hint damp, I'm gonna go in and add a little bit more blue along the edge. If I do it now, I'll lose control and it will just bleed and take over his whole head. And that's not what I'm going for. But I think it is drying so light, I need to make a little bit more intense blue. Just a bit. Okay. Now remember, if you're having any problems, just turn your mic on, start talking, call me in so I see the screen go black. You know, do something because I won't see waving, I won't see the little messages that pop up because I'm not looking up enough. Okay. All right, it is still slightly damp, but I think it might be okay. I'm going to touch in a little bit more blue.
Lene,
Yes?
what color are you using for the body?
We were, okay, so you saw this, right? We were mixing various earth tones. Okay, so I'm going a gray-brown direction right now for all the shadows, but I'm about to add a little bit of blue under his chin and neck. You're talking about what colors did I use to mix those grays and browns?
Yeah.
Okay, so the burnt umber, and I think it's ivory black. So a black, a dark brown, and then hints of reds and yellows to warm it up if I felt like it. You don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
All right, so while he's still slightly damp, I'm gonna go in and add that blue. Okay, and I'm using now a very dry brush. I just wiped it off with my paper towel so that I can try to pull those colors together. And here's a case where I'm going to use the paper towel because it was going farther than I wanted it to. Okay, I'm looking at my examples and stuff. It's going to look different than the one I painted before. That is okay. All right, let's just see how that dries. I'm going to leave him alone for a minute. Let's go back and work. No, let's let that dry a little further. Let's go over here and do the same thing we did to the front flippers that we did to the back flippers. Back flipper. Okay, so that same light brown and gray colors. There's darker shadows up under there, so I'm going to need some gray this time. All right. Let's see. Okay, his neck isn't completely dry, so I'm switching gears again. Okay, this is good for you guys to see my thought process of how to make this happen without mistakes taking over. Okay, I'm going to change again. We are going to do his belly because his neck is still drying. If I go in and start to try and paint right here, if I am not super, super careful and I let my paintbrush touch his wet neck, what's going to happen? All of that darker color I've got in the brush is going to bleed right into his neck. Okay, so that would not be good. If I let him dry completely, then I can paint right up to the edge and nothing's going to happen. So let's ignore this area. We'll let him dry more. The belly's completely dry, so we can go back and work on that. All right, we need hints of green. Hints of green, yeah, we're gonna go green. Get this light green. Mix up a little bit more of it. Sorry, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place here. I've only painted this turtle one time before, so I'm trying to remember what steps worked best before. Okay, now you're not gonna overthink this. Okay, you're just gonna go for it. The green shadows are right under here and right here, leaving some paler space. Okay, you can make it even more subtle, like I did here. It's just a little hint of green there, little hint here. All right, let's go for it. I'm gonna lay in some green there. I'm gonna go with the whole strip along his body. And here, going up to the fin. And then I don't have to worry too much about blending that out into his body, unless you really want to, because we're gonna put some darker spots on top of that in a minute. I like that. Okay, I think I'm gonna add a little bit of green more under his chin, just a bit. Stay away from the edge of the neck because I want to go paint it next. All right, and on the back of his neck, while I'm here, the back of his head, there's like a wrinkle, there's like a darker crease. Okay, so I'm going to get a little bit of darker brown. And on the tip of my brush, I'm staying right on its tiptoe. I'm just going to add a line right there. Fade that off. Yes, I just want it to imply some shadow back there. I'm gonna let that dry, and then I think I'll go back and add even a darker line. So yeah, filled in that whole little area to make it a deeper color. I'm gonna come in and, so you see where this is fidgeting now. Okay, lots of little itty bitty details. There was too much white shell showing there. Okay, I'm darkening the shadow along here under the shell just a bit, so it'll kind of look like the shell's raised up and definitely different from the rest of the body. Okay, you can add that detail if you want, don't have to. And now I'm using a very dry brush. I keep wiping it on my piece of paper towel here so that I can just kind of pull those colors with me, fade them out a bit more. Okay, after the back of his neck dries, we'll go add a darker line. Okay, let these areas dry. Now we'll go put in the shadow that rubs up, bumps, can't talk, that butts up against the neck area there. So going back to the gray brown. And remember, some artists do this, some don't. Some people just paint directly on the page. I tend to have lots of scrap papers because the perfectionist in me wants the absolute perfect color I'm happy with before I start painting. So I find that useful. And there's no surprises like, oh, that's not the color I wanted. All right, so remember, inside edge of this flipper is going to be darker. We want it to have a distinct shade difference from the front of this one so it will stand out. Okay, so I painted that little sort of triangular shape on dry paper. Now I'm going in with just a wet brush, but a little damp. Okay, it's clean, but damp. I'm going up to the edge. It's another way to get things to blend and fade. I'm kind of doing little circular motions and tapping to pull a little bit of that extra pigment down. All right, I feel like we definitely need some shadow here to stand out. So I'm going to do some gray with brown in it. Drop in a little bit of color there. Let that bleed and blend in. I might add just a hint along the sides over here as well. And then there is some reflected light. There is some reflected green on there. So before it dries, I'm going to put in a little bit of green. Okay, now I'm going to let all those colors just intermingle and see what happens. I think we actually need to go a little darker along here. So I'm also going to make the very top edge of that shadow even darker. And it's good to do this while everything's still damp and not come back and do it later, because then I'll get hard lines. And I don't want hard lines. Okay, that looks very dark because it's very wet. Okay, now I'm taking the dry brush and I'm going to soak it up a bit and try to get it to bleed and blend. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone and pull it up closer so you can see what I did. Now, if you're frustrated by this part, that's to be expected, okay, because this is the most advanced part of the whole thing, is getting these very soft shadows. Okay, doing the spots will be easier. But like I said, I can't hold myself back from going more detail because that's the way I paint. You do not have to go to this level of detail. All right, let's get this flipper done. Same technique. It's going to matter less, all the shadows, because you see how we're going to cover it completely with all of those spots. Right, so the areas that we want darker are the top of the fin where it looks like there's a bend here. Okay, so it goes straight and bends. So we want a dark shadow along there and a little bit more shadow down here. Everything else is going to be covered up and it won't matter. You could even leave it white and you won't be able to tell later. Okay. So now make sure it's dry. It's dry enough, I think. Okay, so I'm going to do this angular shape here. And then I want it to be very, very light. So now I'm going to rinse out my brush, dry it off. So it's just damp, clean water. I'm going to blend that out into the rest of the flipper. So there'll be just a hint of tone. It just won't be bright white paper. Okay, then I'll put a darker shadow down here at the tip of the fin. Again, taking some light brown. Rinsing the brush, tapping most of the water off, going along the edge. That introduces just a little bit of clean water. And then you can drag that pigment out across the page. Okay. Now, we got something going on the flipper over here I'm not happy with, but it is what it is. Do you guys see there is one of those blooms happening? Okay, and that was because I went and I tried to put the darker color in there before I waited too long, basically. So this was too dry when I introduced that other color. I don't like that line, so I'm going to get rid of it. This is a good time to show you the lifting out technique. So you use a little piece of clean paper towel. And this is a delicate small area, so I'm going to use just a damp brush. And I'm going to run over that little line that I don't like, adding just a touch of water, and then I'm going to stamp. And this will take off some of the shadow. And I really wanted the shadow there, so we'll add it back in, but I did not like that line. That was a case where it was looking like a watercolor bloom accident. It wasn't looking done on purpose. Okay, I might just have to leave it that way now. That will be okay. All right, let's get those spots on the belly, and then we can start working on all the detailed spots, and hopefully we can knock this out in 20 minutes. I feel like this is the hardest part. I think it's definitely the hardest part and the most time consuming if you care about details. Okay, so those little underbelly spots. Here's what they look like in real life. Okay, all these turtle spots are very unique to each turtle. And there's the ones I painted. Okay, so you can kind of do this any way you like. We're just implying things. We're not trying to go photorealistic. Here's where we need to mix up more brown, because after this, we're about to start adding the spots to the other flippers. The brown straight out of the tube is not going to be the color we want. Okay, we want a very rich, deep, dark brown, and that is too light. Okay, so for the paint, I need to add some black to it. Again, just a little bit. Okay, now that's too black. Okay, so I'll go back the brown direction. We're getting there. Okay, so basically mix a deep dark brown you're happy with. Okay, I don't know if we're gonna need it, but let's mix an even darker brown. Just have that off to the side. So get some black with just a little bit of brown. We might need it. We might not, we'll see. Yeah, okay. So there, I've got 2 shades of brown. I like this dark brown here and this very, very deep, almost black brown. I think I'm ready to go. Okay, now I've got the shades that I want. Okay, if I want to make them lighter, all I do is add a little bit more water. So I'm not going to add water to the color I mixed. I will pull some over here and create a separate puddle. That is probably a tip I should have mentioned before. So we never add white. We pretty much rarely, if ever, add white to watercolor. We use more water and the white of the paper to get the highlights and lighter tones. Okay, so see, I pulled a little more, a puddle over here, a little bit more water, and now I've got this color here, but in a lighter shade. So it's not a different brown, it's the same brown, just more water. Okay, so I'm going to soak the water off my brush. So there's no extra water in there. Roll it in that medium to, the medium brown. And I'm just gonna drop in a few little spots. Turtles have very individual patterns again, so if your turtle spots look different than my turtle spots with a photograph, that's okay. They're like fingerprints. Turtle people, correct me if I'm wrong about that. I believe that's what I looked up, that their shell patterns and their little spots on their flippers and fins and whatever they're called, their legs if they're land turtles, are all very different. Okay, I'm just going to leave that alone now. I've implied some speckled sort of spots there. Let's practice getting those spots on the back flipper. Okay, again, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to start left and move right. Okay, if you are left-handed, you'll want to start right and move left. And so you'll want to be working on like this fin going the other direction. Unless you're used to keeping your hand off. Okay, we don't want to paint and then set your hand down on it and smear things. All right, it is time. So I've got my deep brown ready to go. We don't want a whole lot of water. You want to be able to control this. Okay, this is what we didn't practice yet today. You want to be able to do these itty bitty little spots and lay them down right beside each other so that they're all uniquely shaped. They're not perfectly square. They're not rectangles. They're angular, but they're not any particular perfect shape. Okay, but you want to be able to lay down these little spots. You see that? Where there's still space between them. And they're not going to all bleed together. All right, if you're ready, let's go. All right, I'm going to, what am I going to use? I'm going to use a real photograph for reference. Okay, that's going to help. I don't want to mess up my actual painting and splatter anything on it. So I'm going to just fold this in half. I'm going to lay this right beside when painting real life things, I don't like to wing it. I'm going to try and make it look as convincing as possible. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that. Let me see if I can pull the camera down even a little closer. This should help. Adjust things. Okay, that's a good 4 inches closer. Hopefully you can see the spots. Okay, now what size brush? I'm using this medium-sized brush, which might be too big for these delicate details. You might want to try a smaller brush, but I can't find mine. Oh, no, there it is. Okay, I'm going to start with the really small brush and see if I like it better. The smaller the brush, the more control you can have over these itty bitty little spots. All right, I've been delaying. Let's go for it. I'm just gonna, I can see some of the spots that I drew. You don't have to. Okay, just have fun painting in random little spots, okay? You gotta let the perfectionist go for this part, or you'll be here all day. I have noticed from looking at pictures and other paintings and stuff that the spots tend to be bigger along the bottom the tip of the fin, flipper, whatever. Sorry, turtle people. And after you get used to it, like, this is actually kind of fun, okay? And with watercolor, you have more freedom to be looser with the style and imply things rather than it be photorealistic. With other types of painting, you don't always have that luxury. If you're trying to go realistic, then people expect you to be incredibly realistic. I mean, not always. You can make it obvious that you were trying to just imply something, but with watercolor, the whole nature of it tends to be looser, more implied, purposely done to look a little chaotic. My watercolor techniques tend to be more realistic, but that's not always the norm for watercolor. So if you get some water spots or some bleeding, my point is it'll be okay. You might even want to purposely go that direction. Now we do want the spots to have a uniform color. So that's why you have to keep loading that brush so that its intensity stays the same. And with a small brush, you have to load it frequently. You're going to run out pretty quick. If some of your little spots bleed together, that's okay. It'll just look like one big spot. I'm going to purposely sort of blend and lighten it in a minute in a few spots. Okay, I'm done with that. And I think what I'm going to do is let it dry completely. Nope, I'm not done. I want to create more of a blended shadow here. Okay, so I am going to go more like I did on this one. Look at this. Okay, so I purposely bled several of those together to create a darker shadow. So I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm just going to take the brush and just smear several of them together. That's it. Go right up to the edge of the shell. Okay, let that dry and see what happens. And then after it dries, I think I'm going to come in and do a lifting off technique to just make it look like there's a highlight there and that it's just a little softer looking. Okay, back fin flipper is done. I gotta learn turtle anatomy before I teach this again. Okay, let's do the front two flippers. Same thing. And I like how I painted the other one, so I'm going to live dangerously here. I'm going to lay this side by side and hopefully I won't splatter paint on it. I already took a good photograph of it, so if I was to destroy it, it's okay. I've got a high quality picture of it. I could always get printed out if I needed to. Make sure you got enough of that brown ready to go. Okay, I'm going to start down here at the tip again. And because I like how my pattern turned out for the turtle I painted a couple weeks ago, I'm just going to go with the same basic pattern. But again, not stressing about it. In the interest of time, yeah, we may not finish all the spots together, we might just do this for another minute or two, and then we'll go finish the head together. And then you might have to do more of the spots on your own, because again, this takes some time. And some focus. It's hard to talk while doing this, but I don't really have anything to say at the moment, so just paint away. Let's do this for another like 2 minutes. Then we'll work on the head and eyes together. Eye, there's only one eye. What? Oh, Mr. Litzinger is telling me something wrong with the camera. No. Okay. It was giving me some message. We're okay. Okay, now stop a second, take a look at what you're doing, and make sure that it's not looking too perfect and too planned. Okay, we're not making bricks here. Okay, so change the shapes a bit so that they look kind of all chaotic and very organic, very unique, and no two little spots are going to be the same shape. Not a soccer ball. Mr. Litzinger said you're not painting a soccer ball. Okay, the patterns should not line up. If yours is looking like bricks or a soccer ball, join some of those spots together. Mix it up. Like I'm overthinking this myself right now, and the spots are not as happy with them. But I'm cutting myself some slack. Okay, so you guys should too. I'm cutting myself slack because I'm trying to talk and sort of speed through this with people watching at the same time, and that was a little freaky. Okay. Pressure to make it turn out okay is on, where you guys get to hide your things and not even show me if you don't want to. I don't have that luxury. If things don't go perfectly as planned, it's okay. Remember, we're learning, we're having fun, and it's very rare that the first time you try something, it's going to be a masterpiece. It happens, but it's not the norm. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a minute. We gotta leave some time to work on his head. And I want to show you how to do that lifting the paint technique over here. So pause, take a break. Since they're not joined together, this is a completely dry technique. You can stop, come back. It's not going to hurt anything because we're not blending. Okay, so back flipper here. I am going to add just a little bit of water to a few spots right there and then stamp, and that's it. Okay, and that's going to take away some of the texture and pattern, but I feel like it's also going to add some interest to it, and it's going to kind of look maybe a little slightly blurry, like you might be really swimming through the water, and kind of imply a bit of a highlight right there. Okay, and I will do the same thing to parts of this flipper when I'm done. You can see that I did that here. Just a hint, where I tapped off some of the paint, lifted it a little bit here, and I blended and lifted a little there. But you don't have to, but that's what I did. Okay, his head. Second scariest part. Because these patterns on the head matter. Okay, that is one thing. That other parts of the turtle might be all chaotic and different looking, but these little spots, these little plates or whatever they are on his head, we got to get those fairly accurate, or turtle people are going to look at it and be like, that's not what a turtle looks like. Okay, so looking at the photograph here. Now remember I said we need to add a line on the back of his neck. So I'm going to go in with some very dark brown. And no panicking if you're not caught up to where I am on this yet. Where you're like, we didn't finish the flipper and that irks me. Okay, you will finish it later. Okay, so I'm getting a darker shadow on his neck back there. Okay, and I feel like I need to add some darker shadow along the top of this flipper. So I'm messing with a few little details before I feel brave enough to touch his head. All right, can't avoid the head any longer. All right, fortunately, my little spots that I drew are showing up. Okay, so we're going to paint them in. We're going to try and get them as accurate as we can. There's like these 3 spots that go across here, but his head is turned. His head is at a 3/4 of an angle, so we're only going to see 2 of them. So there's one right in the center and then one larger one that goes up against the eye almost. I'm going to start there. And I feel like I might need to make his face spots slightly on the orange direction. So I'm going to mix a little bit of orange. See how his head is, I want it to be warmer, catching the sunlight coming through the water. There we go. Okay, so I added just a little bit of orange to my brown. Make sure it's wet enough. I want pretty thick pigment, but at the same time, I don't want a dry brush effect either. Okay, here it goes. Paint in that shape. Okay, and there's these 2 little, I don't know if they're like the nose holes, they might be. And I don't know turtle anatomy, but there's 2 of them, 2 little spots right there. I'm gonna go with nose holes. We'll call them that. And then there's, again, sort of like, I think it's 3 of these plates. Well, I can really see 2. So one's kind of right over top of those holes and one's off to the side, close to the eye. Okay, and then there's lots of small little spots more on the top of the head and stuff and around the eyes. And so you can just wing that. And just add in a few little spots. And if they fade or blend together a bit, that's okay, because it's just going to look like it's catching highlights of the sun. Yes, obviously, whether this was an aquarium or it's so perfect looking, it's probably an aquarium. And I think he's a sea turtle. I'm actually not sure what type of turtle he is, but there is light coming through the water, hitting really strong in certain areas. Okay, we want to kind of get that same feel. Okay, of course, it is 11 o'clock, so if you need to leave, I completely understand. If you want to hang in a little bit longer while I attempt to finish his head, you may do so. You can always opt to watch it later or do it on your own. But I don't want to spend a whole other day on this because we got other things to do. You guys can finish this up on your own time. All right, because I'm gonna show you guys how I'm gonna do the eye. And so if you hang with me another 5 minutes, I will finish the eye with you guys. Okay, and there's like these big spots that go right up under his eye. So I'm gonna focus on trying to get them right first, or at least convincing enough. They get smaller the further back they go. And now when all is said and done, okay, all the spots, if you make them unique enough to each other, no one area should stand out. And so if you think an area is looking funny, probably no one else is going to notice. I hear children calling you. Okay, and we gotta make sure we don't go too far. Okay, because you see how the spots, they stop before we reach his mouth. Okay, so it's kind of, and they're not on his neck either. They're just on his head. Okay, so I'm gonna add a few little spots here to imply more of the round shape of the head. And I'm gonna stop. Okay. Nope, I'm gonna round it out a little bit more. Still put one here. I feel like this will make him look like he has a knobbier head if I do this. I might regret it. Oh. Okay, and then I'm gonna kind of stamp out some areas a little bit. Look like some shadows and reflections a bit. Okay, let's get his mouth in there and then we'll go up and do the eye. So his mouth is just a very, very thin little line. And they don't smile. They always kind of look a little grumpy. Okay, so we gotta make sure that this little mouth line, I'm gonna start over here. It has a slight upturn, but overall it has sort of a grumpy feel. Okay, so get a little mouth line in there. And then his neck is not standing out enough to me. I think we need to go back in and add more blue for that, to that shadow. So I'm gonna deepen that neck shadow and chin. After it dries, I'm gonna add sort of some wrinkly lines that we did on this one. So you see they have these little wrinkly necks. And so I'm going to add that in later after he dries more. All right, let's do the eyeball, and then we'll quit for today. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so we're going almost black. Just a hint of brown. You want it to be pretty thick paint so that you can control it better. Okay. And then with your tiniest brush, we're going to paint an oval, but we're going to try to leave a little white spot. So I'm going to paint an oval shape first. Yeah, be very delicate with this. Have your paper towel ready to go in case we need to stamp it out and start over. Okay, and then I'm going to avoid a highlight. So I'm going to paint around a little white spot. Okay, and stop. Leave that alone. Maybe make him a little bigger. Okay, after that dries more, I'm going to go around and add some shadows to make the eye socket stand out a bit more, because right now it's not working yet. But it needs to dry a bit first. Okay, and while I'm waiting for that, we can finish this fin real quick. Go back to that deep brown. The forwardmost fin, his left fin to us, has just these little bitty bitty spots wrapping around the side. And they don't go all the way down. This won't take long at all. There you go, just like that. And then I'm going to make a few little spots wrapping around this side too. More of a darker shadow implied the look. Okay. All right, I think his eye is probably dry enough. I can try to get that eye socket to pop out more and look more like a turtle. And then you guys can finish on your own the little patterns here. Remember, use that lifting out technique. I'm going to do that here in a few spots. I think it just adds some fun watercolor texture to it. Will make him feel like he's underwater more and that light's hitting him. Okay, kind of just blurs some of the details a bit. I like that. Okay, around his eye, I need to go back to that brown, the warmer brown, where I added a little bit of orange to it. Okay, using a fairly dry brush so that I have lots of control. This delicate little area, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and paint around his eye like this to imply the shape a little more. For some reason, I'm not loving the way his eye turned out, but the eye socket, I'm not sure what I did wrong. But
Oh, he's got a different personality than the other.
you hear Mr. Listener, he's like, I like him. He just has a different personality than the other one. There you go. Yeah. Remember, I said no two turtles look alike. Okay, and I could keep messing with that with different tones of black to get certain shadow areas to pop out more. But all right, I think we're just gonna have to call him done for now. Okay, how's it going, everybody? I lost a few of you. A couple people had to leave early. We've got a few left. Any questions, concerns? Here, I'll shut this off. Let me turn Turn the recording off first. Signing off.